Treasure Island. I remember, as if it were yesterday, the old seaman who came to live at our inn. He was tall and strong, and his black pigtail hung on his shoulder. His hands were rough, and he had a white scar across one cheek. His name was Billy Bones, and when he was drunk, as he often was, we were all afraid of him. He never talked to any of the sailors who called at the inn, and he paid me 4 pence a month to warn him if I should ever see a sailor with one leg. My father was ill at the time, and I was left to look after Billy Bones. He drank so much that Dr. Livesey warned him that rum would kill him. But he didn't care to change his ways, and when he lay weak and helpless in his bed, he told me a bit about himself. He had been the mate on board the pirate ship of Captain Flint. When the captain was dying, he had given Billy Bones the map that showed where his treasure was buried. Since that day, the rest of Flint's old crew had tried to get hold of the map. It was hidden in Billy Bones' sea chest. One frosty afternoon, an old blind seaman, Blind Pew, called at the inn. He gripped Billy Bones' hand as he left, and something passed from his hand to Billy's. I saw the fear in Billy's eye when he looked into his hand. "The black spot!" he cried. "Jim Hawkins, listen to me. The black spot means that my old shipmates are coming to get me. They're after my map, Jim. They'll kill me." He sprang up as he spoke, and the strain and shock must have been too much. He fell dead at my feet. Billy Bones died without paying his bills. My mother and I took from his sea chest some of his money to pay what he owed. There was also a bundle of papers which I took for safekeeping. That very night, a gang of ruffians attacked our inn. My mother and I hid outside and watched as they searched Billy Bones' sea chest. Unable to find what they wanted, they shouted and raged. I realized that the bundle of papers in my pocket was what they were after. I went to Dr. Livesey and Squire Trelawney and told them the whole story. When we opened the bundle, we found Captain Flint's treasure map, and the squire was very excited. "Flint was the most bloodthirsty pirate that ever sailed," he cried. "I'll fit out a ship in Bristol. I'll take you, Doctor, and you too, Jim Hawkins, and some of my men, and we'll have that treasure." So it was that Squire Trelawney bought the Hispaniola and prepared her for the voyage. He needed a good crew and took on a one-legged sailor named Long John Silver as ship's cook. This man was very helpful to the squire and picked out some tough men to work the ship. In a few weeks, the Hispaniola was ready to sail away. We set sail under our captain, Captain Smollett. I was ship's boy. The coxswain, Israel Hands, was an able man, and Long John Silver was a fine cook. He carried his crutch on a cord around his neck so that both his hands were free. He propped himself against the side and got on with his cooking like someone safe ashore. We all worked well and willingly, and I often heard the crew singing as they worked. The song was one I'd heard from old Billy Bones. 15 men on a dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. I passed many spare moments in Silver's shining galley, where his parrot, Captain Flint, swung in its cage. It was named after the pirate, and all day long it screeched, "Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Ah!" Silver was interesting company, full of gripping yarns of other voyages and adventures. He was well liked by all, and the men looked on him as a leader. On deck, we kept a barrel of apples for the men to help themselves. One evening, I went to the barrel and, finding it nearly empty, climbed inside to get an apple from the bottom. There I sat, quietly rocked by the sea. Someone sat down on the deck and leaned against the barrel and started to speak. The words I overheard made my blood run cold. Israel Hands and Silver were planning to take over the ship once we had found the treasure. They would kill the captain and any one of us who would not fall in with them. I could not believe my ears. There was a sudden shout of, "Land ho!" The men all ran to catch first sight of the land. I took the chance to jump out of the barrel and join the rest. Captain Smollett was telling the crew about the island. Long John Silver said that he'd been there before when his ship had put in for water. I looked at his smiling face and shuddered. I now knew that Silver was more than a cheerful ship's cook. He was also a bloodthirsty pirate. As soon as I could slip away, I told the captain and my friends, the squire and the doctor, what I had heard. They decided we were safe until the treasure was found. There were 19 pirates, but only 7 of us. When we were ready, we would surprise them and hope to win by catching them unprepared. We now lay off Treasure Island. It looked a gloomy, forbidding place. The lower parts were wooded with rocky peaks jutting above the trees. Even in the sunshine with birds soaring above, I hated the thought of it. We were anchored in an inlet where trees came down to the water. The air was hot and still. The men were restless and grumbling. Captain Smollett gave leave for the men to go ashore, which raised their spirits. I believe the silly fellows thought they would break their shins over treasure as soon as they landed. Long John Silver was in charge of the 2 boats taking 13 men ashore. I knew I should not be needed on board and decided to go ashore too. I ran up the beach into the woods, glad to be free and alone. I sat quietly, hidden in the bushes. I heard voices. I moved nearer to catch the words. I could see and hear Silver bullying a sailor to join the pirates. The sailor angrily refused. Silver's answer was to plunge his dagger into the man and leave him lying dead in the forest. I felt faint, and the whole world swam from me in a whirling mist. When I pulled myself together, Silver, crutch under his arm, was wiping his knife on a tuft of grass. I feared for my life if I should be found, and ran, not caring where. When I stopped, I was at the ford of Stony Hill. My eye was caught by a movement on the hillside. I could not tell if it was a man or an animal. Here was a new danger I felt I could not face, and I began to run toward the shore. But the creature was faster than me, and darting from tree to tree, he came closer. I could see now that it was a man, but so wild and strange that I was afraid. As he neared me, he threw himself on the ground and held up his hands as if begging for mercy. My courage returned, and I spoke to him. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm poor Ben Gunn, I am," he answered. "It's 3 years since I spoke to anyone." I had never seen such a ragged creature. He was dressed in a patchwork of odd clothes and goatskins, and his blue eyes looked startling in a face burned black by the sun. He told me he was rich and babbled away in a high, squeaky voice. Sometimes he spoke sense, sometimes his words had no meaning. I felt he might be a little crazy after being alone so long. He said that he'd been on Captain Flint's pirate ship, and that 3 years before, he'd come back with some seamen to look for Flint's treasure. When they could not find it, the sailors went off, leaving him alone on the island. When he'd seen our ship, he'd thought that Flint had returned. I told him Flint was dead, but that some of Flint's old shipmates were among our crew. When I spoke of Silver, his face filled with terror. I told him we should have to fight the pirates, and he promised to help us if we would take him back home with us. And I think we'll pause here and continue with our story in the next video. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you're going to enjoy this version of Treasure Island. Please reach down, click like and subscribe. Remember, I love you guys, and as Tigger says, ta-ta for now.